welcome to yet another episode of LBS, the show that will infect you with a virus for no other reason than being a douche. Oh my dear Resident Evil, how the mighty have fallen. For those of my fans who are new to this, there was a time when the Resident Evil franchise was considered the finest within the survival horror genre, but in recent years, with entries such as Operation Raccoon City, Umbrella Chronicles and Resident Evil 6, that position within the survival horror genre seems to not live up to its name as it did in the past. When talking about where this down spiral started, it seems that many people turn to the most recent entries. However, in a few corners of the internet, people seem to argue that the very beginning of the desecration of the franchise started with Resident Evil 5. True, during its release, Resident Evil 5 received a lot of positive reviews, but several people online these days seem to argue that Resident Evil 5 is so-called the raping of the horror genre in general. However, that in turn makes me ponder, does Resident Evil 5 suck? Allow me to clarify what I mean with this. Does Resident Evil 5 suck both in the general sense as a game and in the sense of being part of the Resident Evil franchise? There are several fans of the franchise who are angered by this game, but I'm curious if the anger is actually well deserved or not. Does it actually suck? Well, in order to answer, I suppose that the best way to do so is understand what Resident Evil 5 did wrong, as well as what they did right. So let's start with the negative stuff, and let's just turn to the one thing I've heard people complain about the most. That the game is not scary. Yeah, that can be quite a problem. Considering that it was meant to be a horror game, I can understand where the anger is coming from, but I will also say that fear is an emotional response, and incredibly subjective, and what might be scary for one person may not be as scary to another. That is another discussion though entirely, but what I will state is that the elements of horror are drastically decreased due to you having a partner throughout the whole game. Horror is at its most efficient when you are feeling alone, or as in Resident Evil 4, where you have the weak Ashley with you at all time. But considering that you have to defend yourself and her, it adds another layer of tension and strategy to your quest of survival. AI only become tedious and a burden to you once you have to rely on them. On that note, in the single player mode, Sheva is a terrible AI, especially where you have to depend on her. I will not go into much detail, but let me say that I would rather trust a rabbit ferret than the AI. At least the rabbit ferret will stick with me. And as for the story, yeah, I've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger movies less cliché than this.
Stop whining!
So with that in mind, let's instead go over the good stuff. And with me being so angry at the AI, I will be fair and say that the co-op in this game was certainly well done. Playing with another actually plays out pretty smoothly, and I personally get the feeling that this game was meant for cooperative playing all along. Also, the game just looks great. The game was created with the use of motion capture, making the motions seem very realistic in cutscenes, and it shows. With the shades and the colors, I can clearly make out what it is, and while there are some stupid design choices here and there, everything still looks clear. Even to this day, I consider the graphics in this game to be some of the best I have in my gaming collection. Usually I would not care about that, but it really looks so good that my artistic side is getting a small orgasm from this game. I'm not saying it saves the game, but it is a nice bonus. Also, despite being mostly without horror, there are a few moments in the game that actually are kind of tense and somewhat scary, to me at least, but those are very short and very few. It might as well been in any action-adventure game as well, so it's nothing really unique. Though on that note, the action in this game is pretty fun. When attacking enemies and being attacked, I feel like I'm in control and what my character was doing at all times. When something unfair happened, it was because I fucked up, not because of poor game design or anything. As stated, the game went with a more action-oriented gameplay, which is not really that surprising. After all, the game is the sequel to the highly successful and highly influential Resident Evil 4. That game had, in my eyes at least, a brilliant combination of action and survival horror, which brought some of the best elements from both worlds. However, with Resident Evil 4, the franchise opened the doors to the action-loving audience, which is probably larger than the horror-loving crowd. Thus, from the profitable perspective, ignoring this opportunity would not only be looking a gift horse in its mouth, it would be pulling out its teeth in order to find a potential chipped tooth. However, with that said, I will have to go back to the original question. Does Resident Evil 5 suck? Is it the fall of Resident Evil as a franchise? Well, like mentioned earlier, with the perspective of making a bigger profit, one should judge this game from different perspectives. From the perspective of an action game, or just a game in general, this is actually quite a decent game. It has smooth, fast-paced action, and while the story is far from magnificent, it is a traditional saving the world story that works well enough. While the friendly AI can be tedious to work with, the cooperative gameplay is quite solid, and while this is far from the best action game I have ever played, I still recommend that you play it sometime. From the perspective of judging this game as a Resident Evil game or even a horror game, this game leaves a lot to be desired. To say that Resident Evil's down spiral started with this game, though, is a little extreme. This game is not scary, and it does not follow on the spirit of the original Resident Evil at all, especially not in the sense of being the quintessential survival horror franchise. However, instead of judging it as a poor Resident Evil game, I would rather ask you to judge it as a game on its own. This is like I said in my last Fortnight Thought video regarding sequels. Judge it for what the game is, and not for what it might have been. If I had to summarize my opinion of this game using only 3 words, it would be entertaining but shallow. It is not the best Resident Evil game I have played, but I would not say it is the death of the franchise. It is the start of when Resident Evil turned more action-oriented, which, as a horror fan, I do lament over. It might not have the intricate depth that some of my favorite games have, but I certainly have fun playing it, so I ask you to try it out. I'm AlbertKreuger, and even though I have yet to finish Resident Evil 6, here's my opinion of the game so far.